Familiar, Book 2, Pieces.
Sonic, don't you remember me?
Orange pulled back, holding him at arm's length as he searched his eyes for any sign this was some sick joke. Sonic found he was too distracted by how familiar those eyes looked to reply, only shaking his head vacantly in response. Orange frowned, pursing his lips as he turned back to the slowly shrinking portal.
Come on, I need to get you back home.
He grabbed Sonic's hand, tugging him towards the portal with a surprisingly strong grip. Sonic snapped out of his reverie, ripping his arm free and holding it close, cradling it in his other hand as though Orange had burned it. Even if a part of him was urging him to go through the portal with Orange, assuring him that he was safe, he still didn't know anything about him. This could be another trick from someone trying to steal his power.
I don't even know you.
He narrowed his eyes at Orange. Orange blinked in shock, watching him for a long moment as the portal shrunk behind him.
But you did,
he said finally, looking up with glistening eyes. Sonic's heart etched at Orange's words, at the tears sparkling in his eyes, reflecting the stars above. This wasn't a trick, not with the dreams plaguing him every night, and not with the inexplicable longing he still felt towards Orange, someone he had seen in his short life. At least, he didn't think he had. Sonic wasn't sure what was true anymore. Sonic bit his lip, shooting a glance at the portal now barely large enough for the both of them to fit through. He shook his head, stepping back and wincing at the hurt in Orange's eyes.
I can just leave. I have friends here,
he said. Orange nodded slowly, stepping away from the portal as it vanished completely.
Okay, well, I'm not leaving you, not again.
Sonic frowned at Orange's words, at the implications behind them, but disregarded it in favor of the fact that Orange wanted to stay with him.
Why?
He asked suspiciously, shifting back slightly.
Because, even if you don't remember me, I'm still your friend. I miss you. And the others do as well.
Others.
Okay.
Sonic found himself saying, even if he didn't know Orange, a part of him seemed to remember the fox. Why not try and get to know him better? Maybe he could find out what those dreams meant while he was at it. Orange beamed at him, not noticing his hesitance as he nodded.
Great, so.
He looked around curiously. Sonic took that as his cue, gesturing for Orange to follow him back down the cliff towards home. And what was he going to tell Tom and Maddie? Well, they already had one creature from another world living with them. Why not make it two? Orange hummed a soft tune as they walked down the dirt trail, swinging his tails behind him absent-mindedly. Wait, Tails.
Why do you have two tails?
Sonic asked before he could stop himself. He blushed when Orange turned to look at him quizzically, looking down at his shoes to avoid those piercing eyes.
Why can you run at the speed of sound?
Orange asked eventually. Sonic froze, taking steps away from Orange. How did he know about that? Surely, he had been so careless when he had met Orange before. Orange raised his hands in a peaceful gesture quickly.
Used to do it all the time,
he explained.
It's just your thing.
He swished his tails.
Like how these are mine. We all have our own thing.
Sonic pursed his lips, but nodded.
Why are we like this?
Orange looked away, pensive.
That's if you don't remember. It's probably best to wait until you remember something first.
He gestured for Sonic to keep moving, and Sonic hesitated, but did so. He had always assumed he was born like this, but Orange's answer only left him with more questions, and he doubted his ability was natural. Now, they were quiet as they trekked down a slope, what he could usually scale in a minute, taking twice as long as he waited for Orange to find his footing on the damp earth. Sonic pushed aside a branch for Orange, smiling when the chimney, now lazily pumping smoke into the sky, drifted into view, almost home.
So, what's your name?
Sonic corrected himself, because he doubted the fox name. Orange's face fell slightly at his words.
Tails!
He said with a frown aimed towards the ground. The waves of guilt crashed against his heart at the downtrodden look on the fox, Tails, face, but he couldn't help a soft chuckle because it was even more on the nose than Orange. Tails shot him a dirty look.
Sonic isn't any better.
He quipped. Sonic paused, looking away.
Right? Sorry.
Tails' eyes widened and he waved his hands frantically.
No, it's fine, it's just, we used to joke about it all the time and I thought.
He sighed heavily, running a hand through the fur on his head. Sonic frowned.
Sorry, I can't remember anything.
Tails shook his head.
It's not your fault, well, I'm not sure.
They fell silent once more, and Sonic was grateful when the porch came into view. He peeled back the rusty gate, grimacing when it let out an absurdly loud groan into the early morning air. He gestured for Tails to head through first before closing it shut with another squeal. Sonic could hear faint humming nearby, a soft tune pouring outside from the kitchen windows accompanied by the sweet scent of caramel. He couldn't hold back the grin spreading across his face as he turned to Tails.
We're just in time for breakfast.
At the mention of food, Tails' stomach grumbled loudly and he blushed, looking away with a hand over his stomach as though it would jolt the beast. Sonic paused at the back door, turning back to Tails and fidgeting with his gloves.
Would you mind waiting out here for a moment?
Tails tilted his head curiously, but nodded. Sonic showed him over to the metal chairs overlooking the pine trees, leaving him in one before he headed inside. The humming paused as the rich scent of caramelized apples hit him like a wall and he inhaled deeply in appreciation. Wednesday pastries were the best. Maddie turned to greet him with a bright smile as he shut the door behind him, raising her spatula in greeting before turning back to cooking.
Hey, Sweetheart, how was your run?
She asked, resuming her humming. Reality slumped back into him and he frowned, stopping by the table to tap his fingers along the wooden surface nervously. He shifted from one foot to the other while he pondered how to explain the situation to Maddie because as far as she and he, only hours before, knew, he was the only creature like him. Sure, his dreams had left him skeptical, but now Tails sat outside as living proof there were more beings out there similar to him. Had they also been run out of their home? Maddie set the strudel down on the counter to cool, dusting her hands off on her apron before she turned back to him with eyebrows creased.
Honey.
Sonic snapped out of his reverie, turning to face her and forcing his hands to be still. Maddie hummed in concern, stepping forward and kneeling before him so she was at his height.
What happened?
Sonic let out a breath, smiling faintly to reassure her before he began.
I met someone while I was out.
Maddie blinked as though she wasn't expecting something so run-of-the-mill, before her brows furrowed once more.
Did they try to hurt you?
Sonic shook his head quickly.
I'm fine. He's nice, but...
He sighed, frustrated.
I'll just show you.
Maddie nodded slowly, moving back to stand up straight.
As long as you're okay, I'd love to meet your new friend.
She moved back over to the pastry, picking up a brush.
Does he like apple strudel?
Sonic blinked at her sudden change of demeanor.
I'm not sure. I'll go get him.
He watched Maddie coat the strudel in caramel for a moment before shaking his head and leaving the house. Tails sat at the table facing the door expectantly when he opened it, and the fox gave him a nervous grin when they made eye contact. Sonic eyed him suspiciously, turning back to the window when Tails cleared his throat.
So,
Tails said expectantly.
You can come in now.
Sonic nodded, waving for Tails to follow him, holding the door open as he slipped in. He shut the door behind him with a soft click, turning back to Tails.
The kitchen is just over here.
Maddie turned as Sonic walked back in, Tails at his heels.
So, who's here?
Her eyes widened as she took in Tails, the spatula beginning to slip through her grasp before she got a hold of herself, shaking her head with a smile.
Hey there, what's your name?
She asked. Tails watched her with wide eyes, and Sonic cleared his throat to bring him back. Seeing humans for the first time had left him quite stunned as wool. The sheer size difference was startling, not to mention their lack of fur. Tails shook his head, offering Maddie a slightly forced smile as he stepped closer warily.
Tails!
He said. Maddie shared a look with Sonic, eyes sparkling with mirth, mouth twitching upwards.
It suits you. Would you like some strudel?
Tails tilted his head.
What's that?
Maddie smiled, gesturing for Tails to move closer.
It's this pastry here. See, I baked apples into it.
Tails threw caution out the window as he stepped up beside Maddie, standing on the tips of his toes to look at the strudel with eyes wide in awe.
What's that?
He asked, eyeing off the white powder dusting the crown.
It's sugar. Sit down and I'll cut you some. You too, sweetie.
She looked back at Sonic with a warm smile. Sonic shifted when Tails shot him an odd look at her pet name for him, sitting down and drumming his fingers on the table.
So, where are you from, Tails?
Maddie asked as she carefully set about slicing up the strudel. Tails sat down beside him, swinging his legs as he tapped his chin and note. He shot Sonic a look before he answered.
Well, my friend said I live on this land in another world.
Maddie hummed in wonder.
That's nice.
She nodded.
How did you get here?
Tails shot him that look again, and Sonic focused his attention down on the plate Maddie placed in front of him, avoiding Tails' odd gaze.
Ring portal? I was searching for something.
Oh, have you found it?
Tails clicked his tongue.
I'm not sure yet.
Maddie sent him out after breakfast to show Tails around town, pulling him aside to try and force a jacket on his shoulders, which he begrudgingly accepted after she showed him the weather forecast, and a quick reminder to be a humble host.
Where do you want to go first?
Sonic asked, fiddling with the zipper of his red jacket. Tails pursed his lips.
I'm not sure. I've never been to a world with humans.
Sonic smacked himself mentally. Would Tails even know what an arcade was? A cafe? Sonic resisted the urge to drag a hand down his face.
Well, we could go to the park, the arcade, and a cafe later.
Tails nodded once at the plan.
Sounds good to me. Our oldest land used to have an arcade before.
He trailed off, looking out into the woods before shaking his head.
Anyway, I'm sure it'll be fun.
Sonic nodded, ignoring the twisting unease in his gut at Tails' words. What had happened to the island, and why was he being so vague about it when he seemed so certain Sonic had lived there at some point? Town was only a few minutes' walk away, thankfully, and
It'll probably be a little crowded.
he warned him before continuing, a grin pulling at his lips as the stretch of buildings rolled out in front of him. People milled around carrying bags full of clothes, or sat down chatting animatedly at cafes. Sonic loved the atmosphere, loved the sounds of life filling his very being. Compared to his set excuse for a home only months ago, the thriving town was a parade.
So park is across town.
He began as he led the way through the bustling people, none of them sparing him or his companion a glance. Used to the oddities that occurred within their small town by now, Robotnik had set the bar high, and Tails was no threat to them. Some people had to pull their dogs back when the two passed by, however, and Sonic sent them an apologetic smile each time. They paused every so often, Tails enthralled by the simple things Sonic took for granted: the flowers spilling from baskets out front of homes, the pet shop, watching as attendants scooped fish from aquariums and bagged them for eager children, the Gelatis store. Enough said there. Sonic bought them ice cream when Tails pointed excitedly to the store despite the chill in the air, and he found himself smiling as Tails dug into his chocolate chip with the tiny spoon. The part of him that recognized him as a friend even if the rest of him shied away from his excited babble, softening fondly. It was odd appreciating the small things about someone he had only just met hours ago. They sat down at the park, Tails watching curiously as a group of children raced around, battling for dominance over a soccer ball, and calling out to each other, eyes sparkling with glee at the thrill of the game.
This place seems so calm.
Tails said, placing his empty cup in his lap, running the spoon along the rim absent-mindedly.
I'm glad you found somewhere safe to live.
Sonic felt that a knowing part of him bounce with adoration at Tails' words. He only nodded, however.
It wasn't always so calm. There was a mishap a few months ago.
He shook his head, disgruntled.
It's nicer now.
Tails frowned, however, pausing in his movements to turn Blue Eyes bright with concern his way.
Did you get hurt?
He asked, frown deepening, Sonic hugged, lips thinning.
A little. I'm fine now, though.
He reassured him. Tails looked down into his lap once more.
I wish I could have found you sooner.
Sonic bit back a remark of how he didn't remember him anyway, so it wouldn't have made a difference. Robotnik would have had a field day with two otherworldly creatures. Sonic cleared his throat.
So you mentioned others.
Tails brightened at the subject change, much to Sonic's glee. Seeing the fox so downtrodden left him uneasy, and changing the subject came with the added bonus of finding out who the other blurs were.
Oh, that would be him, Knuckles. He is super sweet, and Knuckles is super strong.
He beamed at the thought of his other friends, and Sonic found his energy contagious, a smile tugging at his own lips.
Are they like us?
Tails nodded.
Yep, we're not sure why, but it seemed as though we're made to join paths, even if we didn't remember each other from before.
He looked up at the sky thoughtfully.
We haven't found others, but I'm sure there are more.
Sonic nodded with a slight frown, but shrugged off Tails' words once more, knowing he wouldn't get any more out of him just yet. He looked back to the kids playing soccer as he turned over Tails' words in his mind. There were at least two others, maybe even more. He had thought he was one of a kind, but the news settled an anxious fluttering in his stomach he had noticed until it faded.
What's your home like?
He found himself asking. Tails smiled wistfully.
It's beautiful.
He sighed.
Rolling hills, fields covered in flowers, and a forest covered half of the island. My favorite places.
The mountain.
Tails paused, turning to him with curiosity swirling in his eyes, and Sonic flushed, looking down to avoid his gaze. Tails tilted his head, eyebrows furrowing.
Yep, how did you know?
I'm not sure.
Sonic admitted.
I've been having weird dreams lately of an island.
Tails brightened at his joint words, however.
Maybe your memory is returning.
Sonic hummed.
I'm not sure.
Tails' face fell.
You still don't trust me, do you?
Sonic let out a breath, shaking his head apologetically. Tails sighed heavily, and Sonic bit his lip, silence falling over them. Sonic had taken Tails to the arcade soon after the kids dispersed, and they had worked together through several games before Tails had found a favorite.
What is it?
He asked, eyes sparkling with curiosity. Sonic tilted his head, following where Tails was pointing to an older game he had yet to play. He squinted at the bubbly letters.
Foxy Jumper 2.
He read out. Tails gasped excitedly, turning back to Sonic with pleading eyes.
Can we try it?
Warmth flowed through him, fierce and protective, and Sonic found himself nodding before his mind could catch up with his body. What was that, and why was he suddenly so determined to keep a smile on Tails' face? He barely knew the guy. Tails had kept them playing for well over an hour, only parting with the game when his stomach began to grumble angrily at its neglect. Sonic took him back to the new cave he and Maddie had visited. eager for another rich hot chocolate and decadent cake.
Those carpets were so interesting.
Tails mused as they waited for the traffic lights.
I wonder how they got them to flee.
Sonic chuckled.
It's only a game. It's not meant to be realistic.
Tails hummed absent-mindedly.
They'd be so convenient, though. So much easier to use.
Way easier than what?
Sonic tilted his head slightly. Tails only winked at him, walking across the street as the signal began to chime. Sonic blinked before rushing to catch up with Tails, shaking off the Fox Vega answer again, and moving forward to lead him to the cafe. They sat down by the window, and Sonic handed Tails the menu, staring outside at the clouds rolling across the blue sky while he waited.
What's a chain like?
Sonic blinked, turning back to his companion. Tails was pointing to the small picture of the golden drink. Eyebrows raised curiously.
I haven't had one before, but Maddie says it's cinnamony.
Sonic said. Tails nodded sagely, pursing his lips in thought before shrugging.
I'll try it. And a muffin, I guess. Knuckles makes them all the time back home, but he won't tell us his secret.
He huffed petulantly, and Sonic couldn't stop a smile from playing across his lips. He told the waitress their orders, chuckling when Tails watched her with wide eyes. As she walked away, Tails turned back to him.
Do humans normally come with hair that color?
He asked, eyeing off the waitress' bright green hair. Sonic shook his head with a smile.
Nope, they dye bright colors because they like it.
Tails nodded, looking out the window in thought.
I had thought of dye before.
He mumbled to himself. He blushed when he noticed Sonic watching him.
Just a personal project.
He added. Sonic tilted his head curiously, gesturing for Tails to continue.
Amy wanted to try something.
Was all Tails said. The waitress returned with their drinks, smiling softly at Sonic before she moved back to the counter to prepare their food. Sonic blew at the steam pooling around the rim of his cup, watching as it drifted away before taking a quick sip, nodding to himself as rich chocolate coated his taste buds. Tails watched him for a moment before copying his movements, curling both hands around his mug and bringing it closer to blow on it. He took a hesitant sip of the drink, eyes widening comically.
Wow!
He breathed, taking another heartier sip and smacking his lips.
It's really good.
I'm glad you like it. Just wait for the food. It's amazing.
Sonic turned back to the waitress, watching as she picked her way over around the tables.
Here's your food, love.
She placed their desserts down and Sonic passed her some money, his weekly allowance from Maddie, waiting as she left. He turned back to his chocolate cake, dusted with sugar, and topped off with a strawberry dipped in chocolate sauce. Sonic eagerly poured more fudge over the cake, droning it in syrup until he was satisfied. Tails' blueberry muffin had been heated, seam curling around its crown and a swirl of whipped cream beside it.
This place has the best desserts.
Sonic said, picking up his fork and carving off a piece, smiling faintly when Tails copied his actions once more. He took a bite, sighing appreciatively, nearly choking on his food when Tails moaned loudly. Sonic cawed, chuckling harder when heads turned their way, Tails looking up innocently at him. He took a gulp of his hot chocolate, pausing to catch his breath.
Could I?
Sonic asked, voice raspy. He snorted again when Tails nodded enthusiastically. They made it home as the sun was setting, an explosion of orange splashing across a sky partially hidden by the pines rising tall near his home.
And then Amy kicked him out of her house.
Tails laughed, hands over his stomach as he paused.
Did he really think it was a good idea to track that much mud into her house?
Sonic asked, chuckling as he shook his head.
Knuckles forgets to think before he acts sometimes, but he tries his best.
Tails said, taking in a deep breath before they continued down the driveway, rocks crunching underneath their shoes. Sonic opened the door for Tails, shutting and locking behind them once inside. They cleaned their shoes off on the mat before continuing into the kitchen. Maddie and Tom were sitting at the table, both turning to greet Sonic and Tails when they entered. Tom paused, taking in Tails' form before he grinned and waved. Maddie must have explained the situation to Tom earlier, for which Sonic was grateful. The two sat at the table, Tom dishing up slices of lamb in a pool of gravy, with sides of diced-up baked potatoes and steamed beans. Sonic beamed as he dug in, famished after their day out. Tails copied him once more and he smiled despite himself, looking away so the fox wouldn't see the fondness he had already developed for him.
What's this?
Tails asked Tom curiously, poking at a small ball of white in one of his slices. Tom peeked closer, a smile spreading across his face.
That's garlic and its flavor, try.
He explained. Tails nodded, turning to Sonic hesitantly. Sonic only dug up a similar slice and popped it in his mouth with a grin. Tails followed his example now that he had deemed it safe, sighing softly as the taste spread across his tongue.
It's so good,
he said.
Glad you like it.
Tom said with a nod.
Don't forget to your beans down. Sonic here never does.
He shot a sly grin at Sonic, chuckling when Sonic scolded him.
Hey.
Sonic blushed when Tails sent him a curious look, making a point of stabbing a bean and stuffing it in his mouth, narrowing his eyes at Tom petulantly. Tom stuck his tongue out at him and Sonic threw a potato in retaliation, snickering when Tom let out a shout, ducking to avoid it.
Stop feeding Ozzy, you too.
Maddie tutted.
He's getting fat, aren't you, little baby?
She squeezed the retriever's face in her hands and Ozzy licked her. Maddie giggled, whipping her face off and giving the dog one more fond pat before turning back to her food. Tails watched them with a small smile on his face, eyes softening as he turned back to his meal. Sonic set up a temporary bed for Tails on the floor, his own bed too small for the two of them. He threw together a comfortable pile of pillows and blankets, ensuring it was soft enough before deeming it fit for Tails to sleep on. Tails fell into the mound, breathing out his thanks before his eyes shut and he drifted off, Sonic watching with intrigue from his place on his own bed. He waited a long moment for Tails to get back up, to begin animatedly chatting with him once more, but the fox slept on. He smiled softly, pulling a blanket over Tails' shoulders before he slipped downstairs, avoiding the creaky steps. Maddie and Tom were in the living room snuggled up under a blanket on the couch, murmuring lightly to each other when he cleared his throat. Maddie smiled at him, opening her arms invitingly, and Sonic was quick to snuggle into her side, sighing in content when she wrapped the blanket back around them both securely.
What's going on, sweetie?
She asked softly, setting about petting down his quills in slow strokes.
Remember those dreams I was having?
She nodded.
Tails was in them.
Tom inhaled sharply and Maddie paused in her stroking.
You saw Tails in your dreams before you met him.
Tom asked. Sonic nodded.
And I don't know if it's true, but he says he knew me before all this.
Maddie frowned curiously, resuming running her.
You did mention feeling like you were forgetting something.
Maddie said absent-mindedly, placing her free hand over her chin, and though Sonic nodded.
It still feel like I should know him.
He said.
Did Tails say anything else?
Tom said. Sonic shook his head.
Not really. He doesn't know I've forgotten him, or our Aislinn or other friends.
He sighed heavily.
Maybe the dreams do mean something, in that case.
Maddie piped up. Sonic nodded.
I think they might, but Tails wanted me to go back with him.
Silence filled the air for a long moment and Sonic shifted nervously.
Sweetie, if you want to go and learn more about yourself, you know we'll support you.
Maddie assured him, Wrapping her arms around him to squeeze him tightly, Tom nodded.
It sounds confusing, and won't blame you for wanting to check it out.
Sonic let out a shaky breath, smiling up at them.
Thanks, guys. I don't want to leave you two, but I need to find out what happened.
Maddie waved him off with a bright smile.
Don't worry, we will be here when you need us.
I'll visit when I can.
Sonic promised.
I'll make sure to take extra rings with me.
Don't forget to do your homework before you leave.
Tom shot him a cheeky grin, laughing when Sonic narrowed his eyes at him. He reached over to pet his head affectionately.
I'm messing with you, yeah. At least pack some extra snacks, though.
Sonic's face softened and he nodded.
Of course.
And take your jacket.
Maddie added. Sonic rolled his eyes, but nodded.
Awa.
They smiled down at him warmly and Sonic's eyes burned slightly at the love in their gazes.
I'll be careful, okay?
You better be, they'll make more friends, buddy.
Tom gestured for him to move back to his own room.
Go get some sleep.
Sonic slipped off of the couch, pausing to give each of them a tight embrace.
Night, guys.
Night, buddy.
Night, sweetie.
Sonic tiptoed back upstairs, determined not to wake Tails up until morning, but the fox was sitting up already, arms crossed expectantly. Sonic paused at the top of the steps, before he sat down on his bed, turning back to Tails.
I'll go with you.
Tails' eyes widened, before a grin broke out on his face.
Really?
Sonic hummed his assent.
Not until morning, though. Get some rest and we'll leave.
Tails clapped his hands excitedly, before his eyes widened and he murmured an apology, falling back into the pillows.
Sonic!
Yes, Tails.
I'm glad.
Sonic smiled,